Hi everyone, I'm Natasha and welcome to the South and West Plans panel meeting. Due to Councillor Biffle submitting her apologies at the previous meeting, we just need to formally elect the chair. Nomination has been put forward for Councillor Gruen to chair the meeting today. Please can members indicate if they're happy to proceed on that basis? Thank you. Councillor Gruen, you're formally elected as chair.
Thank you very much indeed. It feels very interesting to be back in this seat with the South and West Plans panel again. I'm looking forward to it. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of the South and West Plans panel. My name is Councillor Caroline Gruen, and I'll be chairing today's meeting. Could I remind everyone that today's meeting is being live streamed on the Leeds City Council YouTube channel so that the public can observe the meeting without needing to be present. South and West Plans panel deals with applications from the south, northwest and west of the city. The aim of the panel is to hear all the relevant information from applicants, members of the public and council officers to help members of the panel make their decision. However, today we're here to discuss a position statement seeking members' views on the proposal at this point in its development. Could I therefore remind members of the panel there will be no vote or requirement for a formal decision on that position statement. And I have introduced myself, so I'm now going to ask people around the table to do the same thing, starting with the person on my left.
Thank you, Chair. Nigel Wren, Planning Officer.
Ahmed Hunaidi, Senior Highways Officer.
Stephen Barley, Design Officer.
Councillor Paul Ray from Huntsland Riverside Ward.
Councillor John Garvani, Horsforth Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Taylor from Chapel Allerton Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Andy Rontry from Kirkstall Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Kilamanaka from Bermondsey and Richmond Hill.
Good afternoon, Councillor Bromley from Horsforth and Rawdon.
Good afternoon, Daniel Lewis, part of the Plans panel team.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Councillor Alan Lamb. I represent the Wetherby Ward and I'm substituting, I think, for Councillor Trish Smith today.
Councillor Barry Anderson, Adlan Wharfdale Ward. Well, if he's substituting for Trish Smith, I'm substituting for Councillor Buckley in that case. Then.
Hi everyone, Natasha Prosser and Clark to the panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nikki Dio, Legal Advisor to the panel today.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Carr, Head of Development Management.
Steve Butler, Group Manager for South and West and Lead Officer at South and West Plans panel.
And if I could just come in here for a moment to say that we do have another late apology, and that's Councillor Campbell, who is not able to attend this afternoon. Thank you. Natasha, could you take us through the first few items on the agenda, please?
Thank you, Chair. Agenda item 1, there's no appeals. Agenda item 2, there's no exempt items. Agenda item 3, no formal late items. And agenda item 4, can members declare any interest?
Councillor Anderson.
The item, I don't know whether it's on the agenda, it was 1. This one you've now taken it as 2 in respect of the Wheatwood Police Station. I have made comments on this, and as a ward member, for me to try and argue that I've not got any views on something in my ward would be a bit perverse. So I am going to remove myself from the debate and the discussion and leave it for everybody else.
Thank you. That's fine, Barry. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Agenda item 5. Apologies from Councillors Biffle, Buckley, Smith and Campbell. Substitutes Councillor Lamb for Councillor Smith, I believe, and Councillor Anderson for Councillor Buckley.
Thank you. So that does take us to the minutes on item 6. Clearly, I don't know how accurate they are because I wasn't in the meeting, so I am relying on you if there are any points. Yeah, okay. So just to refer you, it's item 6 on page 9 of your pack. And is it on page 9, Paul?
Yeah.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you. So I've got to propose for a correct recorder. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. That allows us to go on to the first substantive item, item 7. Oh, it's not item 7, sorry. It's item 8. Nigel, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this presentation follows a member site visit this morning and relates to a full planning application for a new artificial grass pitch with floodlighting, new emergency access, a storage container, relocation of existing long jumps, associated landscaping works at Guiseley School. In respect of updates, a late objection has been received relating to the use of the proposed use of rubber crumb, indicating that this is a hazardous material in terms of its use on soils, water and air contamination. The objection also refers to advice issued by Professor Andrew Watterson, issued in relation to a similar development at Coburn School, which I'm sure some panel members will be familiar with. And this raised concerns about the environmental impacts of artificial pitches and suggested safer alternatives such as natural turf should be used. Section 74 of the accompanying planning report deals with this issue and in particular makes reference to a note prepared by the Football Foundation, which sets out the regulatory framework and current good practice guide, which should be followed in the procurement, maintenance and end-of-life disposal of artificial grass pitches. This is covered by separate legislation and falls outside of the remit of planning controls. So if I may now turn to the slides. We have some technical issues, I think, at the moment, so I'll just pause for a moment. Okay, so as I say, the application site relates to Guiseley School. The site edged in blue is the extent of the school's ownership. The red line relates to the application boundary itself. To the south of the site lies Fieldhead Drive, and to the west of the site lies Bradford Road with the Tranmere Conservation Area beyond. So that's the line of the Tranmere Conservation Area just in this location here. The main school buildings are located to the southeast of the site, the playing fields to the northwest, and the application boundary is basically to the southeast of those playing fields in this location here. To the east is Adelside Road and Alderside Way, just to the north there. Separating the site, the school buildings from the playing field is a footpath which runs in this direction just here and links Fieldhead Drive to Alderside Road in this location just here. As I mentioned, there is an access off Bradford Road at the moment that is to be slightly widened to create this emergency access, which would also serve as a construction access to the proposed developments. Can we close the blinds, because I don't think it's very clear, is it, on the screen? Can't pull them, Steve, electric.
Well, I'm lost now.
I don't know. Can members see the?
Yeah.
Which line is it?
Ah.
Yeah.
You know, we might turn the lights up again. I don't, because usually it's not a problem, is it?
No, no, is it?
So it's, yeah, it's turn them up again. That's what you said. Yeah, maybe. There's some, I think something wrong with that.
Unless bulb's going, I'm not sure.
There's enough TV screens now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I apologise for the quality on the main screen, but I think there are enough TV screens around the room to be able to visualise this. So that, as I say, the red line is the application site. The widened access is at this point here. Then with a new access road wrapping around the existing northern pitch, and then through this small gap within what is an existing line of poplar trees, which will be all retained as part of the development. The actual artificial pitch will be centrally located in this area. To the south is the access link to the main school, with the buildings in this location just here. Again, just in terms of geography, this is Fieldhead Drive. This is Alderside Road in this location here, and Alderside Way just to the north. So in terms of the actual layout, the all-weather pitch is in this location just here. The access road wrapping around that northern perimeter just there. To the southeast and just to the southwest of the proposed pitch would be some mounded areas which would be used basically from excavation material, which would form bunds to help screen the development, and those would be planted with trees and other vegetation, again to help screen the visual impact of the proposal. To the west is this linear group of poplar trees, which, as I mentioned, would be retained as part of the development. From your report, you will note that those trees are categorized as category U trees. So they are in declining health. They're not expected to last any more than 10 years. So as part of the strategy, a poplar management strategy is being prepared to manage their decline and to also incorporate replacement planting as trees need to be felled, and indeed where there are existing gaps, to fill those gaps at the moment with planting, so there is succession planting to provide an effective screen. In this area here, there is a proposed storage container. One of the key proposals is floodlighting, and originally there were 8 columns proposed, 15 meters high. These have now been reduced to 6 columns in each corner of the pitch and on the halfway line of the pitch in these areas just here. In terms of elevations, the pitch itself will be enclosed by a 4.5 meter well mesh fence. As I've mentioned, 15 meter high floodlighting columns, 6 of those. This is the western elevation, which would all be in well mesh. The eastern elevation would contain an acoustic fence, and that would be 3.5 meters high, shown along that long elevation just there. The northern elevation, again, would be a well mesh fence, and on the southern elevation, there is also a proposed acoustic fence required, and that would be 2.5 meters high. That's just a kind of a larger scale version of the well mesh fencing, which would be painted in green. And the storage container details there, which are self-explanatory. So just in terms of some photographic images, this is a view from within the site, generally facing north, with the Alderside estate just to the right as we look at it, picking up some of the existing mature landscaping that exists. This time it's we're looking at an image facing south with the school building just in the background there. Again, on the left-hand side, picking up some of the landscaping which exists adjacent to the property here on Alderside Road. In terms of this image, this is facing east, and this time it picks up a block of properties where their rear gardens face onto or would face onto the pitch. As I've mentioned before, there is fairly existing well-established landscaping along this eastern boundary, but in this instance this is more exposed, and if members are minded to support the application, then there would be a need for additional landscaping to help bolster the existing arrangement. This is a view facing west, and this picks up the line of poplar trees that I've mentioned and the natural gaps that currently exist So the access road or the proposed access road could easily be accommodated within that space without interfering with the trees or their root protection areas. And this is an image of Fieldhead Drive. So that would be to the southwest of the site. This is the corner of Fieldhead Drive where it adjoins the public footpath, which links this road to Alderside Road. Just very briefly, a section of hedging will need to be removed to facilitate the drainage, and I will come on to that in a moment. But that would connect into a main sewer, and the cover, the drain cover is just in that location there. And this is just a view of the public footpath, this time facing east, and you can see the elevated nature of that. And this is a view facing the other way, this time towards Fieldhead Drive. This is the current access link from the school to the playing fields. And then an elevated section of the footpath looking north, but with the properties along the older sides, obviously in the background there. And most of those properties are gables, with the exception of this central block here. Again, another gabled elevation of a property on Alderside Road, and the gable of a property on Alderside Way. And this is a view from Back Lane, looking onto Alderside Road, with the public footpath leading to Fieldhead Drive. And again, this is within the Alderside estate. It's taken from within a parcel of open space, generally looking southwest, again picking up some of the existing vegetation that exists along this boundary. This time further down in the off Alderside Road, again picking up some of the existing mature boundary treatment that exists and the limited public views from Alderside Road. And again, this is the southernmost section of Alderside Road, again picking up the gap that currently exists from that particular aspect. This is a view from Bradford Road. This is the existing access, which will be widened very slightly to accommodate service vehicles. It will be used as a construction access, and it would also be used for an emergency access. And a view from Bradford Road, looking at the line of poplars that I've described that currently exist, which would set a substantial backdrop against some of the lighting columns and help ameliorate against some of the visual harm that they may cause. I've mentioned previously the need for acoustic fencing, and this drawing does demonstrate on the eastern boundary the 3.5 metre screen that will be required along this elevation, and along the southern elevation a 2.5 metre screen, with the mounded areas I've described in this location here, and infill planting along this section as well, to help provide a very broad landscaping strategy. In terms of the acoustic treatment, there are several options that could be used. The one on the right is the typical kind of timber fencing that could be painted green if necessary. But also there is a quilt version as well, which may have a kind of a softer feel to it, which may well be acceptable if members have a particular preference. In terms of lighting issues, clearly there are some sensitivities around the location of the lights and the proximity of properties, particularly those on the eastern side of the site, on the Alderside and Alderside Way. In terms of general separation distances, I'll come on to those in a moment, but this drawing does show the light spill, and the outer contour here shows the extent of the light spillage, which is very which is very low. 5 lux at this point here. So that outer contour is 5 lux. And that's generally, well, it's a street light is about 10 lux. So it's about half the brightness of a street light, to give it some kind of context, but obviously not in a very scientific way. But that light spill is all contained within the site. And then just in terms of the separation distances that I mentioned, the eastern boundary is dog-legged. So at the pinch point, and this is a property on Alderside Road, to the boundary of the property from the pitch itself, that is scaling off at 17 metres. And again, at this point, facing onto the rear gardens of those properties that directly look onto the site, it's at 25 metres at that point there. In terms of drainage, the scheme will drain down into a stone-based system. Originally, it was 250 mil. That's been extended to 275 millimeters. The system will work on the basis that there will be at least 30% voids within that stone-based system. That will accommodate a 1 in 100-year storm plus a climate change event. It will be contained within a geotextile material. So that will act basically as a giant soakaway. And that will then drain down to an outfall, which I mentioned through those photographs, to a public sewer in this location just here. There will be a silt trap as well incorporated. And that rate of discharge will be 3.5 litres a second. So that would be at a greenfield rate. So just to summarise then, in terms of the scheme, in terms of what's been addressed so far. I mean, clearly this is both a sensitive and contentious application, which was first lodged over 12 months ago. During this time, the scheme has been modified substantially. Firstly, to reduce the number of floodlights from 8 to 6 floodlights, to introduce noise attenuation measures along the eastern and southern boundaries of the pitch. The proposed hours of use have also been amended from 10 p.m. on weekdays to 9 p.m. Artificial lighting will also be restricted during periods of bat foraging, so during the bat foraging season. A noise mitigation plan will also be required to ensure adequate safeguards are in place to protect residents during the operation of the development. And funding will also be set aside for potential traffic regulation orders if they are required, should the development cause any unexpected on-street car parking issues. So with these safeguards in mind, it is considered that considerable weight should be applied to the benefits of the scheme in offering improved sporting provision to both the school, local clubs, and the broader community. And on this basis, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the recommendation, which requires a Section 106 agreement to cover traffic regulation orders, the payment of a travel plan monitoring fee, and the conditions which are attached to the accompanying reports. And that concludes my presentation, Chair.
Thank you very much, Nigel, for that thorough presentation. We do have some speakers. First of all, objectors to the application. Simon Branston, I think you're here. Would you like to come forward? And we also have Stuart Nagler for additional questions if necessary.
I think that might be a Mr. Garfield.
Would you like to take a seat and just introduce yourselves before you start, please?
Hello, I'm Simon Branston.
I'm Stuart Garforth.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, are you intending, Simon, to use the 4 minutes yourself and have your colleague for additional questions? That's absolutely fine. I think it's been explained to you, so when you're ready in your own time, please start.
Thank you. I'm privileged to represent a wide range of local residents who've long supported Guiseley School and the inclusive and sustainable use of its playing fields. The acoustic report presented states the most affected NSR, noise sensitive area, is located on Alderside Road. The nearest point here to the development is 15 metres. So why was evidence in relation to disabled, autistic, vulnerable and residents with chronic diseases living here omitted? Medically, this includes autistic acute noise sensitivity to unpredictable excessive loud noises, whistles and shouting, which will during construction and operation cause extreme risk for the need for urgent medical assistance, a substantial risk to life and serious bodily harm, as well as secondary trauma to parents, other residents and Guiseley school children and teachers. This contravenes the NPPF noise table. DEFRA noise policy aims and committee members have a duty to prevent and avoid these plans causing significant, unacceptable and adverse observed effects. Similarly, this data was omitted with the developers' floodlighting spillage contravention for these residents, conserving and enhancing the natural environment, and also in terms of amenity, contravening fielding trust guidance of 30 metres minimum distance between pitch and property. Why has the misrepresentation of noise data happened? The development's nearest NSR is 15 metres from the pitch. So why did the developer model at 30 metres? Why have all the other NSRs been similarly misrepresented? The mitigating sound map appears to take no account of the 3.5 metre side extension, the 7 metre guttering, or indeed the very large seasonal variations and winter variations to the nearby properties, particularly Alderside Road. The two NSRs look on the map to exceed 50 decibels, which exceeds the WHO and LCC criteria and isn't compliant, and ask, given the LCC's contingency, to deem this not compliant as well. Similarly, the stringent baseline noise assessment identified in the planning report rightly states why Alderside Road was selected for baselining. And on the acoustic report, it suggests that this location is closest, and its closest NSR is relatively quiet, as it's shielded from the main sources of noise in the area. This is only 15 metres away. So why did the developer model on a lamppost at a T-junction on Alderside Road, 60 metres away, 51 metres from the nearest quietest NSR on Alderside Road, 39 metres closer to back lane noise and 44.5 metres closer to school noise? Committee members cannot meaningfully assess this baseline as compliant. Committee members should also be mindful that these noise affects bats. No bat surveys have taken place. If this goes forward as planned and suggested, this sets a dangerous precedent for future developments involving floodlighting. The BNG assessment has overlooked the post-development aspects in terms of trees and grassland, which are unlikely to achieve the targeted condition scores. The evidence provided for construction and drainage risk the evidence has been omitted for construction and drainage issues involving surface floodwater risk. We've acted on the behalf of the previous chair of this group to highlight this urgent need for culvert repair and remediation to school and council. And this is captured in the LCC's survey risk, flood risk to Guiseley, but has not been captured. This is not compliant with Section 14 of NPPF or EN5. Every person and school should matter. Why the focus on replicating AGPs at any cost? Again, accommodating Guiseley School's enormous, standard, intense commercial model. These mitigations are critical.
So that does conclude your 4 minutes, but do finish the sentence that you're on, please.
As this application fails to deliver the community integrated, sustainable, inclusive playing fields that Guiseley School deserves, and is there not another way, more collaborative perhaps, where we could all work together to better embrace the environment, the whole community, the neighbouring special schools, and create a beacon through perhaps deaf football and niche diverse sports to benefit all?
Thank you very much indeed. And can I ask panel if there is any questions for the speaker, please? Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I've got 4 questions, and if it's okay, Chair, they're not related, so it'd be easier if I just do one at a time, if you're happy with
to the
that.
speaker.
To the speaker.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, so it's not in a particular order, but I wonder if you just talk us through, there's nothing in the report, what level of consultation there's been locally about the plans?
It was quite mixed, in fairness. There was a lot of confusion with the initial reports and what that went on, the initial things that went on lampposts. There was some noise that went through the school and Guiseley Football Club. But in terms of being able to properly engage the local residents, it's been very challenging. And that's probably borne out in the objections versus support, with the supporters generally coming from outside the district, or a lot, so not all, but a significant proportion of the football supporters came from outside the district. But within 300 metres of the pitch, it appears that a vast number of objectors gathered together to complain about this. This isn't to block AGPs. This is because the proposal is wrong. This isn't because anyone wants to stop the school. The school deserves a sustainable football pitch. And perhaps as we started today, the news about moving away from plastic pitches resonates with what the local neighbours truly want. And so in terms of consultation, no, it hasn't been good. I've formally complained to the chief exec, monitoring officers, and a number of parties within the council, because the whole process has been flawed, particularly for people with disability to actually engage with this process. In fact, on disability, components from the very beginning were fettered, and the medical areas by the whole process were asked to be removed. And having sent critical information, I mean, information that's come from school and NHS, and I know the NHS because I work for the NHS, these should have been brought into account. Disabled people matter.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So I would summarise it. Would it be fair to say that you feel this has been done to you, not with you, and there hasn't been opportunities to have your concerns addressed to this point?
This is really awkward. My wife is a governor of Guiseley School and has been for 10 years. I'm a passionate supporter of Guiseley School and Leeds Council. For my family, they've been fantastic. This process, and it's probably beyond members here, planning process, detrimentally impacts disabled people and people that maybe with protected characteristics find it harder to engage in these processes. I just beg, really, because the situation here is critical for some neighbours. The noise and other things, they can be mitigated, the pitch can be moved, the proximity can be looked at. It does require openness and transparency of officers and of applicants to work collaboratively and collegiately, not adversarially. And that would be the word that I would use to say how this has felt, isolated and adversarial.
Thank you. You've made your point and we have listened and understood, and I think we'll be addressing some of the points that you raised later in the meeting. Would you like to come back again, Alan?
Yeah. So different subjects, Chair. So you referred to serious harm in relation to the noise. I'd just be very grateful if you could expand on that, because that's something we need to take and consider very seriously. So I just want to make sure I've understood the issues properly.
Yes, quite. I could expand on detail, but would ask to do that under Caldecott Guardian rules in a smaller audience, which I could share with patient permission. But at a broad level, the school has an agreed risk assessment plan. That risk assessment plan is based on medical conditions that come from clinicians, medical clinicians. The risks I mentioned and have been publicly recorded come from risk and control measures from the school that would be breached by this. There is no decompression along that Alderside strip. So in essence, this would breach Equality and Autism Acts. Public sector workers, as we all know, have a clear responsibility. I'm sure legal colleagues could add to that. Hence my frustration in this process.
A further question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll do my last two in one, so I'm not abusing my time. So thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you. So the last two issues, I just wondered if you could help with. The officer report referred to the Section 106 agreement if there are unexpected car parking issues. looking at the application, I would be surprised if there aren't car parking issues. So I wonder if you could comment on that, and also just if you could expand on your comments about the bat surveys and the impact on light, and your local knowledge of the presence of bats and their activity.
Thank you. That's quite a broad question. I just had a few students commenting on the car park, but just to add a few things on the car parking, the school has made provision for that at the top of the school. The irony is this pitch would have been better at the top of the school. If you look at the car parking in Guiseley at the moment, it's massively congested, particularly when Guiseley Football Club play, congested at school time. On Fieldhead Road, Alderside Road, they already have cars everywhere. This is under 18 football. How many parents will follow the rules and drop their children at the football car park where it involves quite a circuitous route to the car park? It could be mitigated. It would stop local residents and visitors being able to get places, and it would cause havoc. And if there's noises and horns and other things causing that havoc, it's going to be absolute bedlam in Guiseley. Yes, there are plenty of bats. They fly on an evening. We see them. There's roosts potentially along Alderside Road. That culvert has been there for years. There is no record since 1998 of any repair. It was built before then and it's in disrepair. The wildlife, the hedgehogs, rabbits, it's there. It should be embraced. It should be planned in, but not forced through. Do you want to add anything, Stuart?
Yeah. Car parking can be quite a significant problem on Bradford Road. That's the main road which fringes the Tranmere estate and this so-called emergency access route. You can regularly come down that on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday morning, especially, and there'll be just a line of cars, and they do create issues and dangers to vehicle passage, no question. I personally fear that if this pitch is going to be used a lot more, I mean, that's the whole intention of it, that's going to be that issue is going to be exaggerated considerably. Evenings, possibly bad weather. That Bradford Road there can get quite horrendous in snow and ice because it's pretty exposed, and also in fog. Surprisingly enough, it can be. It's not to look at today. Lovely road, dead straight, no issues. Put a weather mix in it and it becomes a nightmare. Put darkness in it and it becomes it can be horrendous.
Does that conclude your questions, Councillor Lamb? Thank you. Councillor Taylor, please.
Councillor Lamb, I've asked some of my questions, but it's just one related to you. Correct me, did you said you and your wife are governors at the school?
I'm not. My wife is a governor.
My wife is governor. Was early in what I think I've heard is that the community wasn't a part of the communication. So was your wife not involved in this debate from beginning to end? A part of what's going on, because I'm a governor at schools and I know governors take the lead in schools. When I said the leads, we're a part of every conversation. So what's your wife feel about this school being a governor at school? And the second bit is, maybe this is for the officers. Objection comment was not stated on site notice board. So am I hearing that the resident wasn't aware of it until planning coming? Is that what I'm hearing?
So there's several bits to that. Thank you. From my wife's side, I think she was torn. She had conversations. I think she knew that when the plans were coming, but will have stepped out of the meeting because of conflicts of interest, because she knew, particularly given the medical situations, that there would be concern. My initial response was, when I saw it, great, the school's going to get something sustainable. When I looked at the plans, my heart fell. And it does, and it's why this is particularly challenging for me and local residents, because we've worked with the school for years. It's not that the school doesn't desperately need this. This is driven by Humpty Dumpty funding. This is where you try to get the right thing for a public sector body, and the funding is missing, and you're trying to do the right thing, but in doing so,
if I may just intervene at that point, I'm going to close that particular line of questioning down for the moment, because I think we are beginning to wander off the point, and I think you have answered what Councillor Taylor asked you to. Councillor Taylor, is there any part of your question that you feel hasn't been?
Comment on the notice board, was that not advertised in the community?
The formal notes the community came on the lamppost was how the community, our local community, got to know about it. But actually it was put on the wrong lamppost in the wrong areas. So then it had to go back again, and then there was some confusion. It went round and round from when it was first issued.
We can seek clarification from the officers.
Yes, I think I will do, yes.
Move on. Are there any further questions? Yes, Councillor Anderson.
What activities take place on this piece of land at the moment? What actually happens on this piece of land at the moment?
Thank you, yes. Well, during the school day, there's some different sporting activities. Now, residents who are aware of those can see those, and noise disperses differently. During the weekend, what you've got is typically some Sunday football. It moves around because of the flooding issues, as you've seen on the top of the pitch. But in essence, that noise is minimal. It's not the high intensity that's being put into the projected plans. It hasn't got the overbearing 6 15-metre high floodlights that do have effect on disabled residents, or the really close overbearing amenity fences, 4.5 and 3.5 metres in size, that really desperately impact. Now, that doesn't enable them to use an artificial pitch. It also creates a lot more hazard for local residents, and is driven by the intensity of use here. That's why sustainable use is where we want to help the community support the school.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Any further questions? In that case, can I thank both of you very much indeed for coming along this afternoon and sharing your thoughts and answering our questions. We much appreciate it. Thank you. And we now have some speakers in support of the recommendation. So if you'd like to come forward, please. Thank you very much indeed. Take a seat and please introduce yourselves first of all, and say what your role is here this afternoon before you start.
Oh, sorry. My name is Roger Gavin. I'm the finance manager from Guiseley School.
Hi, my name is Mark Stitson. I'm representing Guiseley Juniors Football Club.
And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Coral Curtis. I'm the planning consultant. I'm just here to answer questions from members.
Thank you very much indeed. So it has been explained to you, I think, that you've got 4 minutes to speak, and then I'll invite members to ask any questions they would like, and you can respond appropriately according to your role, if that's okay. And just because people tend to forget, you need to switch all mics off except the one you're speaking on, or the one you're speaking on won't work. Okay, thank you.
Guiseley School and our partners, Guiseley Juniors Football Club, have long worked together to share sports resources to enhance the offer of sports and physical activity to the young people of Guiseley and the surrounding area. Given the proven positive impact on mental health, the school is committed to increasing time given to the PE on the curriculum and increase extracurricular provision. Coupled with the sustained growth in membership of Guiseley Juniors, both organisations require improved and sustainable facilities to deliver on these aims. The opportunity has arisen through partnership work with the school, Guiseley Juniors and the Football Foundation to provide significant financial investment that would support the provision of a world-class AGP facilities for both the students of Guiseley School, the young people of Guiseley Juniors, along with additional community use. We are the only secondary school in Aireborough which does not have an AGP, and this is to the detriment of our young students as we currently have to travel to other pitches in the area to deliver the curriculum. This is fast becoming unsustainable and operationally difficult due to increased travel time costs and being able to book pitches when required due to the significant demand and capacity on other sites. Increasing our PE curriculum on the existing grass pitches can't happen, particularly in winter, as they cannot be played during bad weather without them becoming unusable. AGP solves this and means we can offer a much better quality PE and extracurricular activities. As such, the AGP is critically needed by the students of Guiseley School, and this is crucial in the post-pandemic environment where physical activity has declined in young people, and this is having a detrimental impact on their well-being.
Guiseley Juniors have provided sporting opportunity to thousands of local children for over 25 years. The club plays an important role in the community for young people, helping their development, physical and mental well-being, enhancing inclusivity by working with other voluntary organisations. This role is compromised due to a lack of facilities, which cannot cater for the demand from a membership of 750 players, nor the waiting list of 200 children or the wider community. Guiseley Juniors shares existing facilities locally, which are already at full capacity, with parents currently travelling up to 35 minutes each way by car to take their children to a home match. In addition to the community benefit, there is a strategic football need, supported by the County Football Association and Football Foundation. The Leeds Football Facilities Plan identifies a shortfall of 18 artificial pitches across Leeds, specifically within the northwest area of Leeds where Guiseley sits, a significant deficit in supply compared to other authority areas. We've taken the concerns of local residents seriously, and working with officers at Leeds City Council, this has resulted in reducing the hours of use for the development, restricting floodlighting times, committing to a noise management plan, parking management plan, and new landscaping to shield the development from view. The location at Guiseley School is ideal from a club and community perspective, and the installed change in provision and car parking provides a development that supports full inclusivity of access. For example, without this, girl matches would not be sanctioned. The facility would also benefit other local primary schools and sporting organisations. The usage programme will ensure the facility caters for multi-sport activity and targets unrepresented groups, including women, girls and disability football, and it continues to meet the needs of the local community in future years. Neither Guiseley Juniors nor the school would be in a financial position independently to provide this level of investment without the support of the Football Foundation, and subsequently this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to provide exceptional sports facilities for the young people of Guiseley. We therefore hope you can support your officer's recommendation and grant permission for this much-needed sports facility today.
Thank you. Does that conclude the presentation? Excellent. So can I now ask members if they have questions for the speakers? And I've seen Councillor Ray and Councillor.
Thank you for that. And just on the topic of sustainability, as many of these panels we talked, sustainability is not just one thing. In terms of financial sustainability, what is the cost impact of not having to both the club and the school by not having an all-weather pitch compared to having its current situation in terms of actual, you've mentioned about the time of travelling to different facilities, but what's the financial bottom line by not having an all-weather facility 365 days a year? And a second question in terms of access to funding, again, from a stability point of view, in terms of some of the organisations, particularly the football club that may be approaching, obviously, for funding from outside sources, is having an access to an all-weather pitch becoming more of a requirement to meet some of that funding requirements? And a third question on accessibility. We've heard about accessibility and the rights of disabled people in the previous speaker. I take it an equality impact assessment is being done around accessibility and actually what extra provisions the pitch will provide. Would you be able to just go through that for us, please?
Sorry, just writing those down as you were talking. So I think in terms of financial sustainability, I'll pass over to you guys to answer those questions.
Yep. So in terms of sort of the bottom line impact, if you like, of not having the AGP, then that's very difficult to quantify, and it's not something that I'd like to try and quantify. But you know, the impact is that it means that often in the winter, then the pitch is unplayable. So there's obviously there's a mental health impact of kids not getting out and doing sport in the winter on the pitch because it's too waterlogged, and that does happen a lot. So yeah, I think it's difficult. It's impossible to quantify it from a financial perspective, but certainly there is a big impact on mental health. So I'll hand over to you.
From a club perspective, it isn't really about saving cost, and if the operation and the partnership would be there as a not-for-profit organisation. It's purely about unlocking more potential for more children to access the football and other sporting provision.
Would you like to come back, Councillor Ray?
Yeah, just on the not being able to quantify the cost, that should be quantifiable, because if you're saying having to go to other pitches and things like that, there's a cost in time, staff, and actual the cost of travel. So I would have thought from a finance perspective that you've quantified that as part of your business model for the case for this. So I appreciate you don't want to go into it, but actually when we're making considerations about harm and benefit, actually that is a consideration for us, because actually if there's a detrimental harm to the sustainability of delivering PE and physical exercise, that can be quantified as a cost. So I'd like you to try and quantify that, please.
Can I just come in, because you're linking in two issues, and I understand, Councillor Ray, why you're trying to link in sustainability and impact of land use to the overall picture, but those financial numbers should not be a material consideration in relation to that. So can I just clarify that for you?
I'll have other members down to ask questions, but I'm just going to come in on this issue and say, is it more relevant perhaps to think of this in terms of implications for the curriculum? We did touch on this actually on the site visit, and what would be either the consequences of not having this pitch or the advantages in terms of the curriculum.
Yeah, okay, yeah, and sorry, I should have mentioned that about the curriculum. So what happens at the moment is that if the pitch is waterlogged, then outdoor sports in the winter does get cancelled, so children don't get that outside experience of the cold and the wet in winter. We also want to increase the provision for physical education, and also increase the after school activities for extracurriculum, and that there'll be more clubs playing on there after school.
Thank you. Okay, are you okay with that, Paul? Do you want to come back? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard about issues with car parking and potential for TROs. Now, when we were on site this morning, he said that everybody would use the main school car park because that would be empty. How can you possibly ensure that they all do that? Please.
So first of all, from my understanding, recently the school have created new car parking facilities on site, which I think previously wasn't available or hasn't been available for some time. So now we've got 145 spaces on the site. And as part of the management of the pitch, we've already submitted a framework car park management plan. And it's also been conditioned that we'll have a more detailed car park management plan, which explains how the operation of the pitch is going to work. But essentially what will happen is when people go in to book the pitch, and it will be repeat bookings, so familiar people coming in, they will be advised that they shouldn't be parking in the surrounding areas. There is a car park available on site. There will be somebody on the site to let them in through the gates, show them where everything is. Also bear in mind the changing facilities are on the main school ground, so that is the logical place for people to walk in and through. They'll get changed there and they'll be led down through. I don't know whether you guys walked through that this afternoon, but you'll be walked through the gate and onto the pitch basically. So, you know, you can lead the horse to water. There may be people that decide, no, I'm just going to ignore everything, but it's up to the school to enforce it and try and ensure that they do park on site. And as the fail-safe, we've got the option of the TRO, which involves putting I think it's double yellow lines, isn't it, Nigel? Yeah, so there's a backup a traffic regulation order, which would end up, I thought, putting double yellow lines in the surrounding area, which again would preclude people from parking in Fieldhead Drive.
Shall we just ask the traffic officer to come
Yeah,
and clarify the situation?
That, yeah, but that was my
Please,
understanding. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it would depend on what the impact is, but we wouldn't want to impose something on residents such as double yellow lines. It depends what the problem is and where it is. If there is parking, for example, on junctions or corners and where we should be protecting them, then that's what we would do. But it wouldn't necessarily be double yellow lines and that's it.
Are other options, but yeah, the problem would be dealt with.
Yeah.
I just want to say something from a user perspective. Historically, I think if you've been down there today, you'll have seen the new green fencing that's gone around the fields. So in previous years, that wasn't there. And so it was easier to access the facility through just any part of and any of the surrounding roads. Now with that fencing there, we will be funneled through the appropriate channel that you've all seen today, through the school, through down to the pitch. So as a user base, that will not only be communicated, it will be the preferential route for parents and users.
Thank you. Yes, please, Councillor Gavani.
Yeah, but that around the edge of that fence, there's a public footpath and there is nothing to stop people parking currently on Fieldhead Road and accessing that footpath and then into the field. It's that that's the problem. And whilst you may have, if you've got a club that's picking kids up, minibus, everybody turning up in one, yeah, I can see they would go into the car park. But if you've got parents turning up with their kids who've already changed at home, then how will we be stopping them? It takes time to get a TRO. It can take best part of a year to get a TRO through, in which time there's all sorts of inconvenience caused by residents on Fieldhead Road. It's those people. How do you get those to actually ensure that they could use that car park?
Okay, so people will have to sign in to use the AGP, and that will be through the lettings office, which I showed you this morning. So logically, you would park in the car park, because otherwise, if you parked on Fieldhead Road, you'd have to go back through the school and then out again. So it wouldn't save you any time. We will have fully trained lettings assistants, and part of their roles will be to go and look at traffic on the roads, and if they spot anybody that is parking off site, then they will be reported to the lead hirer. And also, we will ban people for doing that, because we are passionate about people parking in the right place.
Thank you. Can I just clarify so that I can make sense of what's being said? When we're talking about community use, obviously there will be groups of young people and possibly children. Will it all be children, or will it be adult groups as well? What rough proportions would you expect?
It would be both, is the answer. So clearly, not in the end, the main benefit and provision is for the school and the curriculum during the daytime, right? But then in terms of additional community use, it would be both junior and senior organisations. So whether that be, we've already had interest from women's football teams, walk-in football groups and the likes, as well as the children.
A much greater mix than a normal school use.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Councillor Lamb. Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Councillor Anderson first.
Councillor Anderson.
It's okay. That's fine. Just a couple of things. One is just, before I get to my main point, just to follow on from Councillor Gravani, will there be any visiting spectators coming? Spectators, not necessarily the people who are directly connected to the football participants, but will there be spectators coming at any time? And I'll come to my main point afterward.
So I've been associated with the club for 10 years and look after both boys and girls football teams. The reality is this isn't the Premier League or the WSL. These are your children from 6 through to 18. So the people that come to the time at which the children are playing are the parents or potentially grandparents that might share a vehicle or walk to the site to watch their children or grandchildren play.
In that case, they find the parents that are bringing the children may use the correct route and methodology, but it could be that the wider family choose not to. I mean, that I'm just asking the question. I mean, that's my interpretation. Is that your interpretation, or do you feel that you will be handing out booking forms to people and saying to the parents, under no circumstances, get your relatives to park in the surrounding streets?
So anybody that uses it would have to go through our lettings vetting process, which includes things like safeguarding, insurance, etc., etc. And we will make it very, very clear to them that there's no on-street parking. And again, we will police that through the lettings assistant. And should we see a vehicle, for example, on that corner near to the entrance, then we will monitor that. And you know, with the best will in the world, we probably wouldn't be able to stop absolutely everybody, but we will monitor that, and we will report to the lead hirer, and we will issue bans where appropriate.
Back to that when I'm raising my points later on. To come back to my main point, the consultation. We heard the comment that it was a view was expressed that the consultation was not as good as it could have been. What consultation did you conduct? How many letters did you deliver around the immediate houses? And did you have any public meetings? And did the school at any point make it a learning point for the pupils as to how to consult and to use democracy as a way of moving forward in their lives?
Yeah, so if I can answer that one. So the school did send out a letter to surrounding residents. Forgive me that I can't remember the exact dates and times and the number of people, but there was a letter sent out. I remember reviewing it, advising people of the development. I would also say obviously the planning process offers meaningful public consultation. I think in the report there's been over 300 representations. We've listened to the residents' concerns, and we have tried to address the concerns where possible, which Nigel ran through, which involves, you know, reducing the number of columns, reducing the hours of use, etc. The application's obviously been in for 18 months, and there's been several rounds of consultation through that process.
Thank you for that. How would a resident have been able to find out the minutiae of the planning application? I accept in terms of the strategic, fine. There could have been notices put on lampposts. There could have been, the council could have actually sent out neighbour notification letters. That I'll give you as a given for that. But was there a website that people could go to get the minutiae? Was there any public exhibition as to what the layout would be and what other things you were going to, bearing in mind that the school's just next door? Was there any public sessions like that?
Not that I'm aware of, no. There was no public exhibition undertaken. In terms of the minutiae of the planning application, that is obviously all publicly available online. Hopefully my details would have been available as well if people wanted to contact me to discuss any particular questions, and obviously Nigel's available as well.
Thank you. Does that conclude your comments yet? Okay, Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow on that theme first, so would you accept with hindsight that you should have given residents the opportunity to talk directly to you, to listen to their concerns, try and talk them through and see if any mitigation should have taken place, and that this kind of thing should be done with the community and not to them?
So, well, the thing I say is I obviously became involved during the planning process, so I don't exactly know what happened between the school and the local residents. But I would advocate that the planning process is an appropriate route to consider issues, and we can work through that. And as I say, we have listened to what residents have said and tried to amend the application as much as possible.
Chair, thank you. I'm sorry, it's really frustrating to get answers like that, and we get them frequently at panels, unfortunately, but any applicant that comes to us for an extension or a relatively small scale development, the first thing any of us would advise them to do, go and talk to your neighbour. Go and talk to your neighbours. This is a significant application. It's going to have a significant impact on people living close by. Being a good neighbour, which I'm sure you would hope to be as a school and a junior football club, surely to goodness you would accept you should have gone and physically talked and given opportunities to engage directly.
Councillor Lamb, is there a question in there?
That's the question.
That's the question.
Yeah.
It sounded like a comment.
It sounded like a, well, I'll put a question mark on the end. Shouldn't you have done this?
I think you know what you want the answer to be. Yeah, and as I said, there was, you know, a letter was sent out to residents, and I say I can't remember the context of that letter now because it was so long ago, but I'm sure that invited, you know, comments and questions to the school directly.
Well, I'll have a comment at the appropriate time on that. My questions are, and I'm certain you will have done this as part of preparing a business case. So how many days a year do you lose to bad weather on the current pitches? And can you confirm, my understanding of these rubber crumb pitches is in extreme heat, they're not usable. So have you calculated how many days you expect to lose in extreme weather events on both circumstances?
I'd say probably about 50 days. About 50 days then I would estimate. And I'm not aware of them not using it in extreme weather circumstances. I'm not actually a teacher, so that's my understanding.
So my follow-up question, has that piece of work actually been done? Because you've said probably and maybe, has the piece of work been done to assess? Can you give me evidence of how many days of use are lost on the current pitch?
I'm not aware that piece of work has been done as to how many days are lost. It's a lot, and it's frustrating for both pupils and teaching staff.
Does that conclude your questions? Excellent. Councillor Rowntree, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just thinking about the noise mitigation angle, and there is, I believe, to be a condition that no whistles are used after 7 p.m. I'm just trying to get my head around the concept of pressing the mute button on the ref and sort of practically how is this going to work. And I understand it's been tried in, it's been adopted elsewhere in Leeds and has been successful. But just what are your thoughts? Or what difference is this going to make to the to the flow of the game? And what are the guarantees that it will be observed and enforced?
Sure. So if I answer that, so yeah, obviously in the evenings you can use it for either training or matches. And what we would do in that example is either have the match, if it were a match, finished before that time as part of the agreement, or any time after that only be for a training session where whistles wouldn't therefore be needed to be used.
Do you want to come back?
So you wouldn't be there wouldn't be a competitive match after that time. Is that have I got that right?
That's right. So for a training session, you would just train with the children and not need to use a whistle anyway.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
You, Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, sorry, thank you, Chair. In terms of viability and sustainability, I've been involved in some of these applications in my own ward, and my understanding is there's always a concern that while you get the capital funding to start with to put the pitch in, at some point it's going to need replacing, repairing, and there is no funding to go with that. You have to generate that from commercial activity, and for one pitch that's challenging. So I'm keen to understand at what point you expect the lifespan to be and what plans there are then to replace the pitch, because all the indications are don't expect another grant for a new pitch when you need it. So you've got quite a lot of money to generate, which means commercial activity, which means it's harder to control the whistle police and so on. So could you give us some comment on that, please?
Yeah, so first of all, in broader terms, this is also something that Sport England have been quite concerned about, with how you keep pitches running, how you keep sports facilities running. So as part of the community use agreement, which we have to do as part of planning, you need to ensure there's mechanisms for a sinking fund for the pitch, for issues such as maintenance, replacing the pitch at the end of its life, etc. So in broader terms, that's something that's applied now across the board for these types of planning applications, to ensure that essentially you have a program of use and you start quantifying how much money you're bringing in from the pitch, and that goes into a sinking fund, which allows you to then, use that in future. And then I think Mark had some more detailed points.
Yeah, no, I was just going to build on that point, which is pretty much the same in terms of it. The operation doesn't need to generate a profit, but as you rightly say, it needs to make sure that it can pay for itself, not just now, but for that period of replacement and enhancement in 5, 10, at the certain stages where things need to be done. So that the only financial aim is to make sure it covers itself, including that long-term improvement that needs to be done.
So on that basis, could you just explain then, if we take out how much of the time will be used and available for curriculum, how much of the time will be used for the junior football club, what amount of time is left for commercial activity, and what proportion of that which is left do you need to fill for this to stack up? Because my understanding, it's a lot of money you've got to generate for that sinking fund. We're not talking about it's tens of thousands a year you need to get in. So how well used does this facility need to be commercially?
So the aim of this facility, because of the way it would hopefully be funded, is that it won't need to charge the high commercial rates that currently can be achieved through other facilities. So actually, hopefully that will allow inclusivity of all different organisations who might not be able to reach those levels. And actually, it's surprising that actually you don't need to be charging those higher rates. I think people must be making a lot of money somewhere on some of these facilities, and that wouldn't be the aim. The aim would be to answer your question, to reverse engineer that answer, is actually what needs to be true from the school perspective is obviously the curriculum during the day. The school usage then is also between 4 and 5. The football club and any other voluntary organisation can be booked in thereafter with no overlap. I think that's part of the report that's noted as well. So depending on how much of that additional usage is offered and taken up by other organisations, the football club would then fill the gap in between to make sure that it operates sufficiently and financially.
Sorry to labour the point, but it didn't really answer the question, Chair. The question: what proportion of the time needs to be used? You must have done that piece of work as part of your business case. I'd just like to know a number, or what percentage of time does it need to be used for commercial activity?
I don't have an exact figure, because I don't know the exact type of organisations and what they're able to pay, to be honest. So that would depend. If you were asking me as a commercial organisation, I'd have a different answer. But we hope that we don't need to charge those full commercial rates, and therefore, depending on the final demand from other organisations, the football club would then fill the gap in between.
Just to remind ourselves, we do need to focus on the application in front of us and not whether the school is able to sustain their business. That is I would suggest to you, a separate issue from the application in front of us. I've got Councillor Anderson and then Councillor Bromley.
Yeah, on the pitch itself, after whether it's 10 or 15 years, let's just accept that it's going to be needed and reviewed sometime in the future. What is the sustainability and the carbon capture that we're talking about here? Because after a while, I know a pitch in my locality was an absolute disaster when they ripped it up because they couldn't dispose of it because of the materials that were used. I accept that modern pitches may have less of an environmental impact, but what is the environmental impact of having to remove a pitch and dispose of it. Is that included in all of the thoughts that you've got? You might not have put a monetary value on it, but there is a local value in terms of the carbon capture. Have you done any analysis on that or not?
I'm afraid I don't quite understand the question, I'm afraid. So in terms of carbon capture, that's obviously a very detailed assessment that we would have to do. In terms of what the Football Foundation asks for their sports pitches and all their artificial grass pitches is that they are recycled at their end of life. So when the pitch does come to its end of life, it gets carted off to a facility in Scotland, and it's the only kind of facility in the UK that recycles these pitches. And then that material gets them reused in other sports pitches to make the perimeter boarding, other uses. So I can't answer the exact, in terms of actual carbon.
Well, but the point I'm trying to make is that that's based on, that recycling location is based on the current circumstances. Rightly or wrongly, the world moves on, and things that were once acceptable become unacceptable in the future. Out of your control. It's sort of the unknown unknowns that we're talking about here. It's just, what I'm thinking is the environmental impact of ripping a pitch up, having to store it at the side, and whether or not the health issues of crumb are or are not resolved by that time. Because if you've suddenly got, because when I went to see the one locally, there was quite a reasonable thickness, and it was the goalkeepers that suffered more often than not. They came back up with crumb all over them. Very few of the players actually did. It was the goalkeepers. So what's the impact of the crumb needing to be swept off at the end in terms of environmental impact and in terms of the carbon that's going to be necessary in order to do that work, as opposed to an ordinary football pitch, which, okay, deteriorates, but hopefully wouldn't need the same carbon input to it?
That's a tough question. I've got to be honest with you. So the answer, I can't quantify that, and I can't pretend to quantify that. Yeah, if you've got an answer for that.
Sorry, who is the colleague coming on now?
So this is my colleague Alistair from CC Grass, who actually helps deliver the pitches and might be able to answer that kind of question. Yeah.
Could I just precursor?
Sorry.
First of all, can I ask you to sit down, please?
Yeah.
Secondly, if you're going to speak, we'll need the mic on. And just before you do, my perspective on this is that these are questions, Councillor Anderson, that would apply to any football pitch application made in this material, not specific to this actual piece in front of us now.
Point about the long-term sustainability of it and how much money needs to be set aside as time goes on in terms of renewal. And what would happen, and we've also got, we don't want the club to have to face up to this, but say the views on this type of pitch or crumb were to change in 5-10 years' time. And so the local club, football club, would suddenly have to find some funding to replace, renew, or do anything like that. It's just,
as would many others in the same situation, is what I'm saying. So we need a policy around it. We need to think around it. We're asking a very specific question, which I think it's almost
if we had a normal standard
football
football pitch, would it be any different? That's the point.
Yes. Okay. So a gentleman in front of us feels that he can address the issue.
Good afternoon, Alistair Moore. We sort of lead on the supply of artificial turf and have got some insight into these artificial turf matters. There's been a lot of work done in the last 3 or 4 years on artificial turf, and in particular the end of life. Coral's touched on it already. There's several plants now opened up in Europe. It's a growing business. It's a growing marketplace to increase the amount of recycling of these old fields, because there's more and more of them coming around for recycling. And that is certainly the case within the UK. This is being led by the Football Foundation and Sport England jointly to ensure that these policies and these recycling facilities are in place. Coral's already touched on what happens with the actual yarn that's in the product that gets recycled and reused into other plastic type products. In relation to the sand and the rubber crumb that is within the product, that is all rolled up with the old artificial turf and taken away to the recycling plant, and it is segregated out at that point. The sand is reused back into sports pitches and the rubber crumb is reused back into typically rubber-based products. And at the moment, a lot of that is going into children's play areas where we have the rubber crumb regularly used around the country, but it can also be used in many other products where we're looking for a cushioning effect, and those could be domestic, commercial, or whatever. So those products are not going to landfill at the end of life anymore.
Thank you very much indeed. I think I've got Councillor Bromley.
I just wanted to check that in terms of for the school, you'll be putting in place a letting assistant that will be there no matter what organisation comes in. So they will be taking ultimate responsibility for overseeing neighbourhood concerns and keeping that communication going forward in the future.
Yeah, so we currently have lettings in the school, and we do employ lettings assistant for every letting. We would not have a letting without a lettings assistant on site. And policing, parking, language, whistles will all be part of their role, with that being reported back to school and that being raised with the lead hirer if there are any issues.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cavani?
Thanks. Another question tied to the rubber crumb and microplastics. I noticed as we're walking down from the school to the site, you actually had boot scrubs, just upturned brush heads down the sides of the paths so that the kids could clean the mud off the boots. One thing that was put in on a similar application last year was actually boot wash facilities as they left the AGP pitch. Is there going to be something similar put in here?
Yes, there is, and it's all part of the wider mitigation strategy for rubber crumb. So at every gate entrance, there are grids. The idea of the grids is that the players, when they come off the pitch for the studded boot, the grid will pull out the rubber crumb and the rubber crumb will drop down into the well below the grid. Periodically, the school will have to come around and just lift the grids and clear out the mat well below and take the rubber crumb and put it back onto the pitch. And that works both ways. Obviously, players coming onto the pitch, it allows them to clear the mud off their boots. So we're not contaminating the artificial turf with mud, and we keep the rubber crumb from going back out into the wider environment. So it's almost like a decontamination zone at the entrance in and out of the pitch. And that's every gateway in and out of the pitch.
Thank you. Any further questions for the speakers? In that case, can I thank you very much indeed for coming and facing those very many and difficult questions. We appreciate the fact that you've responded. Thank you. Are people ready for a comfort break, or would you rather go to the end of the item? Go to the end. Happy with that? Okay. So questions to the officers now, please, panel.
Still legal. I've never before been asked to look at an application where health had been such a major issue. If you were to ask me what weight or otherwise should I put on health, what is the legal position as to what weight we can and cannot put on in the overall scheme of things? Because I genuinely do not know the answer to that.
Okay, I can give you a general position. So we as a public authority are required to discharge certain responsibilities. And when we're discharging planning functions, we've got a responsibility under the Equalities Act, and we've got a public sector equality duty. So in broad terms, we've got a duty to have regard to specified matters that come to our attention when we're discharging certain duties. Planning is a statutory duty. So if it's come to our attention, we've got a duty to have a regard to it. But what that duty is, it's not specific. It's about having regard in form. And the real issue is that you've taken those matters into account during your decision making. And there's some reasoning with that. What you don't have to do is achieve an outcome. You've got to have regard to it. And that's the key element. It's quite a complicated area of law. We've had case law, we've had appeal decisions where this has been at the forefront for this council in considering how you discharge that equalities duty against the planning application. And it depends on degree and fact. Now, this information has just been presented, as far as I'm aware, in a public domain. That's a matter for you to consider as to whether the information within this report adequately deals with those issues that you've now been alerted to, or whether it requires further consideration in order to fully discharge. I hope that's clear. It's a very broad context, but that is the approach that we ought to take.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. For the first question for officers, that was really helpful and clear. So given that it's just been put to us that there's potentially a serious risk to life and serious harm as an impact of the noise generated from this development, can officers reassure us that that has been listened to and heard, and what measures have been put in place to address those concerns?
Thank you. Can I just say that I find this slightly awkward, and I'm surprised it's been raised in the manner that it has.
Can I just pause before you go? If you're going to start disclosing things, I really do think that we need to go into private sessions. If you're not permitted to, then I think you need to answer the question in broad terms, in the broadest of terms that you can.
I suggest that you answer it in broad terms, and if colleagues don't find that sufficient, then we go into private session.
Thank you. I did receive some material. I was asked not to exchange that material with any party. It was ultimately agreed that I could share that information with one other party, which I did. But the contents of that could not form part of any public report.
Sorry, just to step in there for Councillor Lamb's benefit and the rest of the plans panel, that obvious restriction on the revelation of such information was actually made by the speaker who's raised it today. So we're working under his request that we didn't disclose any of that information. In general terms, Nigel can give information upon where the noise receptors were placed and what the outcome was as a result of our consultee, who actually is on holiday this week, in terms of a response to what we thought about the impact of the noise and where the noise was taken, if that helps, Councillor Lamb, because that's probably about as far as we can go on that particular issue, because we were asked specifically not to discuss the details of that by the person that's actually spoken today.
Well, if I can ask in broad terms as well, that an issue has been raised, the person who's raised it has said it has not been addressed adequately to their point of view, and what I'm looking for from officers, without giving me any specifics, is to what lengths have we gone to try and address those concerns, and what more could we do, given we've heard that the person who raised them doesn't think they've been addressed?
That's a quite reasonable question to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. The person who raised it asked me not to document it, but I did raise it with the environmental health officer, and I asked him to investigate the specific issues. But as I've already alluded to, it was never the intention to specifically document those in a public report.
But just talk generally.
Nigel, sorry, Nigel, you can respond to the questions about the perceived impact of the noise generated by this proposed use on the neighbours that live in that particular cul-de-sac, because we have that information, and that's the general information I think Councillor Lamb's seeking.
Okay, sorry. So just to generalise then, yes, a noise assessment has been carried out by a full acoustics report has been presented. That has been assessed by the council's environmental health officer. I think one of the issues that has been raised is that only one microphone recording took place, and that was within the Adelside Road area. And the suggestion has been that that's led to a misleading situation in terms of inaccurate recordings and a false baseline data. Again, I've spoken to environmental health to ask them that specific question. Their view is that that location has generated what would be a pessimistic view, given that it's shielded by houses and that you wouldn't be picking up baseline or noise data from Back Lane or from Fieldhead Drive from Bradford Road. So that noise data wouldn't have been included. So the reality would be it's probably to the applicant's disadvantage rather than to their advantage in terms of what they've done and how they've approached this.
If I may, Chair, Nikki, we might need Nikki to help us. My difficulty here, and it's going to make it very difficult to make a decision, is we've heard from somebody that they've got serious concerns. We're not in a position to hear the specifics of that, and nobody's in a position to reassure me that it's been resolved to the satisfaction of the person who raised the concern. And I'm not sure how we, right now, can deal with that.
Could you advise us, Nikki, on the way to proceed on that? I'm thinking to myself, it may be better to get on with all of the rest of the debate and perhaps deal with this either on a separate occasion or as a separate issue. But you tell me.
I agree. I mean, clearly, this is a difficult situation because the information has been presented to an officer with strict restrictions placed on it and conditions, and officer must comply with those requirements. But you as decision makers may consider that there's some weight to those issues. And the officer, to his credit, has taken it as far as he possibly can from the experts that we've got in-house in relation to exploring on noise impact and other issues as well. Now, you may wish, and with the consent, we can seek some further information as to how far that information can go wider, or the objection to be considered in that specific realm of what impact it has in terms of disability and health, that be resubmitted and an impact assessment be considered against that and then re-presented to you. That is one option. But this is a very unique set of circumstances that's only just come to light in a public forum through the speaker. So I'm going to leave that there in terms of impact assessment and in discharging public sector equality duties in relation to the issues that have been raised by the objector. And as the chair says, I concur that we deal with the other issues and then we revisit this as to whether that issue needs to be returned to members.
Just before we do that, Nigel, can I ask, can you reassure us that the work that has been done so far on noise mitigation would be similar and in line with the sort of noise you might expect would be emanated from similar pitches and ones that we've approved on previous occasions, i.e. that it would be up to an average and acceptable standard in most circumstances?
Thank you, Chair. The noise report concludes, and environmental health agree that it is within the LCC guidelines. It complies with all of the council's guidance in that regard. The only exception being the use of whistles after 7 p.m. And I think that was discussed earlier, wasn't it, with your direct exchanges with the applicants and how that would be managed and controlled. So in every regard, it complies with LCC guidance on this matter, with the introduction of the acoustic fencing, which I described as part of the introduction to this scheme. So it is compliant, and everything that has been raised through me, both publicly and privately, has been thoroughly investigated.
I think the difficulty here, and just to try and make it clear, because as you know, I like things simple. I think basically what we're saying is we as officers have gone as far as we can in terms of considering the information, but with strict control over how far we can go with that. So in a way, how can we answer a question when we're not allowed to properly share the information with anybody, I think is the point I'm going to make. So what Nigel's saying is within the parameters that we've been able to work, we've considered the noise issues, we've introduced, or the applicant has introduced the noise mitigation measures in terms of the fencing, etc. The location of that noise monitoring station actually works against the applicant, i.e. it stripped out background noise, which basically means if anything was heard, it will be more obvious. So I think we've gone as far as we can in terms of trying to answer that with the restrictions that we had on the information that was provided from Mr. Branston. I'm not sure what further we could add to that, either in this debate or any further debate, if we're not allowed to share the information with anybody else. So we can't answer a question when we're not allowed to.
Nevertheless, we can think creatively about how we can address your concerns. It might not be on this occasion, but we can think creatively about it. Right, I've got Councillor Ray, and then I've got Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. And it's just from some clarity of points which I think will help colleagues. So in terms of, obviously we've had a conversation about the health impacts. My understanding is for when it comes to the health impacts of such a pitch, the responsible authorities are actually the Department for Health and its sub-bodies in terms of the regulators and Sports England. Is that correct? And so they are the statutory consultee in terms of the health impact. Is that correct?
Not necessarily.
Right.
You are just making a decision on land usage,
No,
and their interaction with us is simply as to whether it fits within their policy. There are supplementary guidance notes that they have in relation to health and well-being as well, and they can come in separately on that. But for us as a decision maker, it's all about land use.
Can I just come back 1 second? I think I completely understand that is our duty, but it's been raised, and you said obviously about how we weigh a decision. And actually, if there is, our decision is not to make decisions on things that are done by other statutory bodies. So what I'm trying to do to maybe help the conversation is are we to give significant weight to the advice of other statutory organisations who are placed to make that statutory advice rather than us, rather than that? Yeah.
Who's going to add something in at this point?
I joke about this because and I say that over my years of being a planning office, it's a bit sad that the only two expertise I have tend to be in rubber and gentlemen's clubs these days. But seriously, we went through this in depth with the Coburn Academy thing, and obviously I was anticipating this. So just to sort of help you, I have in front of me here documentation that's been produced by Sports England on the particular health issues, and this is a facts document. And the question here is, does ELT infill pose a specific risk to human health? So if you can just bear with me on this, because I will then update it from the advice that we've got from April of this year. The question has been a subject of significant investigation since it was first raised in 2015 in the USA, and the concerns relate to the polyaromatic hydrocarbons that you often find in things like car tyres, which is the basis of the rubber crumb. Widely occurring chemicals, etc. It goes on. It does then actually make a comment that actually when you eat grilled meat, particularly if it's been overcooked at a barbecue, you're likely to ingest more of these polyaromatic hydrocarbons than you are actually by taking a spoonful of the rubber crumb. But just moving on, it talks about 2016 European Chemical Agency. Now, bearing in mind, we're not actually in Europe, but I will qualify this as well. Launched a study to assess whether the concerns were justified in terms of carcinogenic material in it, etc., etc. Report published by them in 2017, the ECA has found no reason to advise people against playing sports on synthetic turf containing recycled rubber granules as infill material. And if any of you watched the ladies' Six Nations rugby, nearly every single one of the pitches that was done a few months games was played on those pitches. You could see it bouncing up when they hit the ground. But continuing, 2020, the results of a major pan-European scientific study undertaken by internationally respected independent researchers and published in scientific journal Science of the Total Environment concluded no health concerns were found for AGPs with the ELT-derived infill material. Cancer risks were below 1 in 1 million, and risk characterization ratios for non-carcinogenic substance were below 1. And then moving on to 2013 in a document, because obviously this continues to burn, and there are moves in Europe to ban the use of this altogether. We've not got there yet, but actually Sports England is continuing to actually ally themselves to that advice, even though we're not in Europe. So I have a document here, which is April 2023, which is our position on this. And ultimately, towards the end, it basically is just suggesting that there's a precautionary approach should be taken, because it concludes by saying even if the EU law on a ban is passed, it would be important to have a transition period because of the 3 GAPs that are already in widespread use everywhere, and particularly in communities across Europe. They were costly to put in place and to remove, but it's also important to note that there are currently no widely available alternative infill products on the market that is effective, suitable for all weather conditions, and deliver the required performance standards in terms of the repeated use available. And this is why we're also committed to exploring alternative artificial pitch systems that are more sustainable. So the position is there's no ban as such. There's a limited connection at the moment, or empirical evidence that these things, unless you are sat eating it, is actually a health issue. But everybody's taking a precautionary approach, and even at the last press release, at the last discussion that we had in some depth about this at Coburn Academy, Martin Farrington, the director, himself accepted that Leeds City Council was also taking a precautionary approach. And at any point where the advice or the changes in the type of material, of course, we would respond to that. There is currently investigation for a 4G pitch, which actually has a different type of material, but it also has its own downside, and at this point has not been approved for use because of the limited bounce effect if you hit the ground, but also you're more likely to have major damage from carpet burns, for want of a better description, in the grass. So the position is there is no overall ban. We are, in effect, Sport England following the EU lead on these things, precautionary approach, but at the moment it's been suggested there's no alternative and there is limited actual direct link in terms of carcinogenic problems.
Okay.
Can you put your mic on, please, when you speak?
So just to kind of short circuit that, which I appreciate long-winded, that's why I asked the question. So as I said, there are experts in the field that are highlighting that there may not be content on that particular area. Because I'm not talking about the use line, because we said the use line is going to be for a playing pitch. That's not, it's the specifics of the material that has been raised as a concern, which is, bear with me 2 seconds, which is a question that should be reasonably answered in a public forum. You've now given me reassurance that the expert consultees are not raising significant concerns to ban its use and the monitoring the situation. And as they are the expert authorities and we are not the expert authorities, it would argue that potentially that we as plans panel members should add reasonable weight to their considerations. That I can see the legal officer is having a moment.
I think I misunderstood your initial question, Councillor Ray, and I do apologise, because I thought when you were talking about health bodies in Sports England, I was linking it to the previous point that was made about our duties under health. Did you? So I answered it in that context, but I appreciate now you were trying to establish that where there is a regulatory framework to deal with certain aspects of CRUM or particular material usage. And it's not just material usage, it could be air emissions, it could be land decontamination. There is specific case law on this. We should not, through the planning regime, be duplicating that. There's so much case law. There's Hopkins and development where High Court judges have said, you can have regard to it, but you shouldn't be duplicating that. That is controlled through a separate regulatory framework, and you leave that to take its course. And that's my answer to your question. I do apologise for confusing it with the previous point of discussion.
But nevertheless, a very helpful summary, Councillor Ray. Thank you very much. It's most helpful. Now, I've got Councillor Taylor waiting. Will your point? Okay, thank you.
I'm a bit puzzled. Why should it not be in writing to us to read and digest? The officers, it says they didn't want it in writing, but then they come to the meeting where it's out in the public domain and talk about it. So why could we not read about it, but it can be out there in the public domain?
I mean,
and Nikki, I've heard you and I really understand what you're saying, but I'm a bit confused with this bit. If we're not to read about it, why publicize it?
We are at cross purposes. The last contribution was on a different issue from the information that was previously being referred to, but none of the information that remains confidential has been raised in this meeting in public. It hasn't been disclosed. Because he was in direct response to the speaker. Councillor Lamb.
Chair, I think we're talking about two different things. The answer that was just given was about the health impacts of the rubber crumb. The concern the gentleman raised was about the health impacts of noise. And to be fair to the gentleman, he did say when he spoke, he would be happy for us to go into a private session and hear more about what his concerns were. And so I just want to make that clarification. I do have another question, please.
So, Councillor Ray, did you want to come back on points that you made?
Just on that, I have anything to help our conversation, because obviously the point that we're all getting stuck on. And I'm going to be really careful because I don't want to unnecessarily ask the wrong question. When looking at the totality of legislation, obviously legislation cannot stipulate every single scenario and prevent every single impact. So whether we've heard the information or not, and we can make reasonable surmisations about if you just bear with me 2 seconds, even if we were to, okay, no, that's fine. If I'm misunderstanding.
Councillor Lamb.
I really think we're cross purposes. I think you're asking about the health impacts of rubber crumb, which we got an answer. Well, the answer that was given was about
can I just exercise some chair's authority here? Paul, make your point in full, and then we'll listen to Councillor Lamb.
So, in relation to the point that Councillor Lamb was raising earlier, the concerns about making a judgment without hearing the information in full about the other particular point, when considering the legal duties of the council in terms of making those considerations under the Equalities Act and all the other kind of regulatory frameworks, I'm assuming, and I'm assuming there's probably case law on this, and this is why I'm looking at the legal officer. I'm assuming that impacts on individuals are somehow considered in case law in terms of actually the totality of an application and its overall, this is why I'm asking the question. So actually not knowing the specific individual case in terms of detail, if that's only one consideration out of the total realm of positive harm or negative harm or positivity, what does case law tell us how we should consider that?
So as you can imagine, case law is fact specific. You won't have cases for individual situations invariably. The way that the public sector equality duty does, it approaches it in broad and general terms of having regard to. So you can't specifically deal with one particular individual. You've got to look at it in the widest context. I'm not going to go through specific case law. But you're right, it's about balance. But once it comes to your attention, you have got a duty to have regard to it. And it's come to your attention now. That's what I would say.
Councillor Lamb and then Councillor Anderson.
It's taking your guidance to go on to a completely different point, if that's okay. So this is really to the highways officer. So we heard from the comments of the speakers in favour that it seems they haven't actually done the work to understand how many commercial lettings is going to be, and therefore how many movements there are going to be, and how many people and by what mode of transport they're going to arrive. So how have we objectively assessed what the traffic impact is going to be if that information hasn't been supplied to you?
Thanks, Chair. So we looked at it from a sort of an independent highways authority point of view, where we can assess the impact of the development. Now it's on the basis where all five-a-side football pitches would be hired at the same time. So you would have 10 people plus some subs and coaches. So in total, there could be 64 people at any one time on this site when it's hired out. And through work that's done by the Football Foundation through their Park Life program, it's the surveys that they've done is about 70% of people who would use five-a-side would travel by car. So that equates to 45 car trips. So, but further to that, not everyone would drive by a single car. So there'd be elements of car sharing, there'd be elements of drop off and pickup. So through and the study that's been done by that is 45 of that trips would sort of reduce down to 29 cars during the peak hours, so per hour, sort of the usage, and that's precisely what the traffic generation would be for this development, for that pitch.
So thank you for that. Just for clarity, does that take account of the handover time. So when because that's the people will be leaving, getting changed their car, there'll be a period where everybody's car is there at the same time.
Yes, yeah, there would be a slight of crossover, but through the community use agreement, I think the school will have control over sort of a stagnation between the bookings. So you would be split. You would have a bit of a rest between the two periods.
It will astonish many people to know that I have played five-a-side football before, and knowing how the people, whatever handover period there is to generate the commercial income, the people who are leaving will be on site at the same time as the people arriving, because they'll have to get showered and changed and leave. The new people will arrive and get changed and go on. There will be periods where there are twice the volume of cars, and I'm just concerned that that hasn't been assessed.
Yeah, it has been assessed. So that is 29 cars going in, 29 cars going out approximately during. So my concern in highways is the impact during the peak hours. So on a Friday afternoon, for example, that would be the approximate traffic generation. We've assessed that. There isn't a severe impact, and the car park is sufficient to accommodate that.
Did you want to come back?
It's probably more of a comment, to be honest, but there's enough of an impact for you.
Shall we wait for comments then?
It's useful to put it as a question, actually, at this point. There is enough of an impact for you to think that it warrants having a Section 106 pot for remedial work.
Okay, I'm going to make a decision.
Chair, can I just interrupt? I'm so sorry. One of the objectors has just placed something on my desk. For the purpose of transparency, I've returned it to the objector. I've not read the document, so I just wanted to make that clear to members.
I'm going to make a decision. We are going to have a slight recess now. Let's say 5 minutes, because this has probably gone on long enough for us all to need to stretch our legs. And during that time, we're going to consider a private session. So if you would like to go and take 6 or 7 minutes, please, under 10.
Chair, we'll need to take a vote on going into private sessions as well, just so that
we
you know. Do you wish to do that now before recess, or do you wish to do that as soon as we return, so that there's no?
I think it would be in the public's interest if we did that now. Would it not?
As long as members don't speak to members of the public during that recess, it may be better and prudent to do it after the recess.
And that We really appreciate that. So we have decided that the right thing to do is to go into a private session now. So we would like to ask the public gallery to
We just need
leave.
to have a vote first. don't
Oh,
we?
sorry, we do
Yeah.
have to have a vote.
That's the way the panels,
So I'm proposing that we go into private session. Could you indicate whether you agree with that, please? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. So now I'm going to ask the public gallery to leave. And could I ask Simon Branston to remain with us, please?
No, council. I'm just going to make sure the YouTube stuff's off.
Oh, yes.
Good point.